John Carpenter's The Thing stands as one of the most influential horror films ever made, a masterclass in paranoia, practical effects, and psychological terror. But what if we told you that beneath its frozen Antarctic setting lies a web of behind-the-scenes revelations that most fans have never uncovered? What if the very elements that make this 1982 classic so enduring were almost abandoned entirely? What if the cast's haunting performances came from places far darker than viewers realized? Let's peel back the layers of ice and isolation to reveal what truly happened during one of cinema's most challenging productions. Because when you understand the sacrifices, the studio battles, and the sheer determination that brought this nightmare to life, you'll never watch The Thing the same way again. The Thing wasn't just a challenging film to make, it was a film that nearly self-destructed at every turn. Secret number 1. What most viewers don't realize is that this now revered classic was initially considered a catastrophic failure, both critically and commercially. Released just 2 weeks after Steven Spielberg's family-friendly E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Carpenter's bleak, nihilistic vision of an alien invasion couldn't have landed at a worse time. America wanted wonder and hope. Carpenter delivered paranoia and despair. The film opened to scathing reviews, with critics calling it instant junk, a wretched excess, and a gruesome mess. Roger Ebert famously wrote that it was a great barf bag movie, while Starlog magazine declared, "This movie is not about science fiction. It is about 50 gallons of blood." Universal Studios executives watched in horror as the $15 million production became what they viewed as a commercial disaster. Kurt Russell, who played helicopter pilot R.J. MacReady, later revealed that the initial reception devastated the entire cast and crew. "We all thought we'd made something really special," Russell explains in recent interviews. "When it bombed, it was like having your heart ripped out, not unlike what The Thing does to its victims." What audiences in 1982 couldn't possibly know is that they were witnessing what would eventually be recognized as a watershed moment in horror cinema, a film so ahead of its time that it would take nearly a decade for critics and audiences alike to catch up. But the journey from script to screen was even more turbulent than anyone realized. Secret number 2. Before John Carpenter stepped into the director's chair, The Thing had already undergone multiple transformations. While many fans know it's based on John W. Campbell Jr.'s 1938 novella, Who Goes There?, few realize that Campbell's story itself was heavily revised from an earlier, longer manuscript called Frozen Hell that remained undiscovered until 2018. Even more surprising is how dramatically Carpenter's vision departed from the 1951 film adaptation The Thing from Another World, where the original film featured a humanoid, plant-based alien. Carpenter returned to Campbell's shape-shifting concept, a decision that would require unprecedented innovations in practical effects. Secret number 3. Screenwriter Bill Lancaster, son of actor Burt Lancaster, spent months crafting a screenplay that went through 17 drafts, with early versions featuring a much larger cast of characters and even female scientists at the Antarctic base. Universal executives pushed back, fearing that the presence of women would distract from the psychological tension. This controversial decision created an all-male environment that Carpenter would later use to intensify the film's themes of isolation and distrust. But the most revealing aspect of the screenplay's evolution was the ending. Lancaster's original finale was significantly more optimistic, with clear survivors and a definitive defeat of the alien. Carpenter, however, pushed for the famously ambiguous conclusion we know today, a decision that would contribute to the film's initial rejection but ultimately secure its legacy as a masterpiece of existential horror. This tension between commercial expectations and artistic vision would define every aspect of the production to come. And as the cast assembled in the frigid summer of 1981, none of them could have predicted just how demanding their journey into Antarctic isolation would become. In the summer of 1981, the production moved to the Universal Studios lot in Los Angeles, where Carpenter had the sound stages refrigerated to 40 degrees Fahrenheit to create authentic breath vapor and maintain the integrity of the elaborate practical effects. Secret number 4. Kurt Russell wasn't John Carpenter's first choice for MacReady. The director initially approached both Jeff Bridges and Nick Nolte, who turned down the role. When Russell stepped in, continuing his collaboration with Carpenter after Escape from New York, he committed to a level of transformation that few actors would attempt. Russell revealed years later that he based MacReady on Western film icon John Wayne, adopting subtle mannerisms and speech patterns that most viewers never consciously register. "I wanted him to feel like this reluctant hero," Russell explains, "someone who doesn't want the responsibility of leadership but takes it on because nobody else will." To embody the character's increasing isolation, Russell deliberately distanced himself from the rest of the cast during filming, a method approach that created real tension on set. Secret number 5. What audiences never realized is that the exhaustion and paranoia visible on screen wasn't entirely acted. The cast endured 12-hour days in freezing conditions, wearing heavy Arctic gear under hot studio lights. The refrigerated sound stages, necessary for the breath effects, led to cases of mild hypothermia among crew members. Actor T.K. Carter, who played Cook Knowles, later admitted he developed pneumonia during filming. The psychological toll was equally severe. Director of photography Dean Cundy designed a lighting scheme that deliberately kept the actors in shadow, creating a constant state of visual uncertainty that mirrored the film's themes. "We wanted the audience to never fully trust what they were seeing," Cundy explained. But that meant the actors were working in this perpetual twilight that became mentally draining. Secret number 6. Perhaps most revealing was the experience of Richard Masur, who played the dog handler Clark. In a rare interview, Masur admitted that Carpenter encouraged a real atmosphere of suspicion among the cast. John would pull actors aside individually and tell them contradictory things about their characters. "Who might be the thing, who to trust," Masur recalled. "We started genuinely distrusting each other off camera." This manufactured paranoia created the authentic tension visible on screen, but it came at a cost. By the end of the 3-month shoot, several cast members were barely speaking to each other. The isolation wasn't just in the script, it had become their lived reality. And as the production moved into its most technically challenging phase, even greater demands would be placed on these already exhausted performers. While The Thing is celebrated for its groundbreaking creature effects, few fans understand the revolutionary process that brought these nightmares to life, or the man who endured professional humiliation to create them. Secret number 7. Rob Bottin was just 22 years old when he took on the role of special makeup effects designer for The Thing. What most viewers don't realize is that Bottin had replaced the legendary Stan Winston, who left the project after creative differences with Carpenter. The pressure on the young effects artist was immense, and his response was to attempt something never before seen in cinema. "I wanted every transformation to be unique," Bottin later explained. "No two mutations should look alike, because this organism is improvising based on the DNA it absorbs." This ambitious vision required innovations in materials, mechanics, and techniques that pushed the boundaries of pre-digital effects. What the cast never publicly revealed until decades later was the physical toll Bottin's commitment took. Actor Richard Dysart, who played Dr. Copper, recalled finding Bottin sleeping under tables on set. He worked for weeks without going home, living on candy bars and coffee, Dysart shared in a 2012 retrospective. There were times we thought he might literally work himself to death. Secret number 8. The reality behind the scenes was even more extreme than the actors initially let on. Botten was hospitalized for exhaustion and pneumonia before production wrapped, and suffered a nervous breakdown that required several months of recovery. When he accepted a Saturn Award for his work on The Thing, he did so from a hospital bed. What makes this sacrifice all the more poignant is that upon the film's release, many critics dismissed Botten's groundbreaking effects as excessive and gratuitous gore. The New York Times called them elaborate but unaffecting. It would take years before the technical innovations in Botten's work, from the use of heated chemicals for the blood test scene to the hydraulic puppetry in the kennel transformation, would be recognized as revolutionary. Secret number 9, even more revealing, is the fact that one of the film's most iconic sequences wasn't Botten's work at all. The Blair Thing in the film's climax was actually created by Stan Winston's team, brought in when Botten's hospitalization threatened the production schedule. This subtle shift in artistic approach is detectable to trained eyes, a secret handoff between two effects legends that most viewers never notice. The physical toll of creating these nightmares extended beyond Botten to the actors themselves, who endured hours in makeup chairs and performed alongside mechanisms that were often unpredictable and sometimes dangerous. And nowhere was this challenge more evident than in the film's most infamous scene. The blood test sequence stands as The Thing's narrative centerpiece, a masterclass in sustained tension where MacReady tests each man's blood with a hot wire to identify the alien. Secret number 10. What most viewers don't realize is that this scene almost didn't exist in its current form. In Lancaster's original script, the test involved a different method altogether, observing how the men's blood reacted to a serum derived from the alien tissue. Carpenter felt this approach lacked visual impact and worked with Botten to develop the heated needle concept. This seemingly small change would create one of cinema's most memorable sequences, and one of its most technically challenging. The production team built a fake severed arm filled with a mixture of cream corn, mayonnaise, and strawberry jam for the visceral transformation. But what audiences never knew until recent cast revelations was that the explosive reaction we see on screen was significantly more powerful than anticipated. The hydraulic mechanisms misfired with nearly triple the intended pressure. "We all jumped for real," Charles Hallahan, who played Norris, revealed years later. "That wasn't acting. We were genuinely terrified." The shock on the actors' faces, particularly Palmer's famous line, "You gotta be fucking kidding," captures authentic fear. Actor David Clennon later admitted he suffered nightmares for weeks after filming that sequence. Secret number 11. Even more surprising is what the cast revealed about Kurt Russell's performance during this pivotal scene. The flamethrower he wields throughout the sequence was fully functional, loaded with real fuel, and generated actual flame, an OSHA violation by today's standards. The heat was so intense that Russell's eyebrows were singed during filming. The sweat visible on his face isn't makeup or glycerin, it's the result of standing for hours under hot lights while holding a 35-pound weapon. Kurt never complained once, Keith David, who played Childs, recalled. He was standing there, drenched in sweat, balancing this heavy flamethrower, take after take, and just delivered every time. This physical commitment created the authentic tension that radiates from the screen. MacReady's desperation feels real because Russell was genuinely at his physical limit. But perhaps the most revealing aspect of this sequence came in what happened between takes. Cinematographer Dean Cundey had devised a subtle lighting technique that no one, not even the actors, knew about during filming. When shooting characters who were still human, Cundey would place a small light in their eyes to create a subtle gleam. When filming those who were aliens, he deliberately eliminated this eye light. This nearly imperceptible detail gives viewers subliminal cues throughout the film, a secret code that most fans never consciously register even after multiple viewings. Ennio Morricone's haunting score for The Thing is often cited as one of horror cinema's most effective soundtracks. Secret number 12. What most fans don't realize, however, is that the music we associate most closely with the film wasn't what Morricone originally composed. And the story behind this change reveals one of the production's most significant creative conflicts. Morricone, the legendary Italian composer known for sweeping orchestral arrangements, initially created a much more traditional horror score. When Carpenter first heard these compositions, he faced a difficult decision. The music was brilliantly crafted, but didn't match the minimalist, pulsing dread he envisioned. Rather than reject Morricone's work entirely, Carpenter selected only specific pieces, primarily the synth-heavy, pulsing themes, and left roughly 50% of the original score unused. What few people know is that Carpenter himself composed additional music for the film, uncredited, to supplement Morricone's selected pieces. The famous heartbeat-like bass pulse that opens the film is Carpenter's work, not Morricone's, a subtle signature that connects The Thing to Carpenter's other films despite the presence of an external composer. This musical hybrid created tensions that neither man spoke about publicly for years. Morricone, accustomed to having complete musical control over projects, felt his vision had been compromised. Carpenter, despite his admiration for Morricone, believed the film's atmosphere required a specific sonic approach. Their creative differences reflected the film's central theme: distrust and the struggle to preserve individual identity. Secret number 13. Even more fascinating is what the cast revealed about how the sound design affected their performances. The production team installed subwoofers beneath the set floors that emitted low-frequency vibrations during key scenes, frequencies just below the threshold of conscious human hearing. These vibrations created a subtle sense of unease that the actors couldn't identify but definitely felt. There were days when everyone was on edge for no apparent reason, Keith David explained. Later, we learned they were literally vibrating the floors beneath us to keep us anxious. This manipulation of the actors' physical environment, without their knowledge, mirrors the film's themes of invisible infiltration and subliminal threat. The sound design extended beyond music to the creature effects themselves. Sound designer Alan Howarth revealed decades later that the distinctive noises made by the Thing during transformations were created from unexpected sources. The squeals of discomfort from his newborn baby, recorded and distorted, were blended with the sounds of stretched condoms and oiled leather. This unsettling mixture of the familiar and the alien creates a subconscious discomfort that viewers feel but can rarely identify. As post-production on The Thing neared completion in spring 1982, Universal Studios executives finally saw what Carpenter had created, and their reaction revealed a fundamental misalignment that would sabotage the film's initial release. Secret number 14. What most fans never realized is that Universal had expected a very different film. Despite approving Carpenter's vision on paper, studio heads had anticipated something closer to the 1951 original. A conventional monster movie with clear heroes, definitive victories, and, perhaps most importantly, a less graphically disturbing creature. What they got instead was an existential nightmare with unprecedented body horror and an ambiguous ending. They didn't just dislike it, production designer John Lloyd revealed years later. They were genuinely disturbed by it. One executive walked out of the screening. This visceral rejection led to a series of last-minute compromises that would significantly impact how audiences first experienced the film. The most damaging change came in marketing. Universal, uncertain how to sell the film, created a campaign that fundamentally misrepresented its tone and content. The theatrical poster, featuring a glowing humanoid figure, suggested a film more aligned with close encounters than the psychological horror Carpenter had created. The tagline, "Man is the warmest place to hide," was effective, but set expectations for a very different kind of alien invasion story. What few people know is that Carpenter fought for an alternate marketing approach that embraced the film's nihilistic vision. He commissioned a series of posters that featured the cast members with their faces distorted or partially transformed, images that captured the film's themes of identity horror. Universal rejected these designs as too disturbing for mainstream audiences. Even more revealing is what happened to the film's release date. Originally scheduled for a fall release, appropriate for its chilling atmosphere, The Thing was suddenly moved up to June 25, 1982, placing it in direct competition with E.T., the Extraterrestrial, which had opened 2 weeks earlier. This decision, which Kurt Russell later called studio suicide, forced a bleak R-rated horror film to compete with Spielberg's family-friendly blockbuster during the summer movie season. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, editor Todd Ramsey admitted. Everyone involved with the film knew what was happening, but we were powerless to stop it. The result was precisely what the production team feared: critical rejection and commercial failure. The Thing opened at number 8 at the box office and quickly disappeared from theaters. While The Thing is celebrated for its major set pieces and transformations, the film's most revealing artistry lies in subtle details that most viewers never consciously register. Elements that cast members have only recently begun to discuss openly. Secret number 15. The most fascinating of these hidden touches involves the character's breath. In the frigid Antarctic setting, every exhalation should create visible vapor, a continuity challenge that most films handle inconsistently. What The Thing viewers rarely notice is that Carpenter and his team maintained perfect breath continuity throughout the film, with one deliberate exception. In scenes where a character has been infiltrated by the alien, their breath vapor subtly disappears. It was John's idea, Kurt Russell revealed in a 30th anniversary interview. The Thing doesn't need to breathe, so it's just going through the motions. This nearly imperceptible detail serves as a subliminal clue for attentive viewers, a secret language hidden within the visual framework of the film. Even more remarkable is what cinematographer Dean Cundey disclosed about the film's color palette. The production design team created an intentional color evolution throughout the film. The early scenes feature warm amber tones in the common areas of the research station, which gradually give way to sterile blues and clinical whites as the story progresses. This subtle shift mirrors the replacement of human warmth with alien coldness. The station itself visually transforms, just as its inhabitants do. The costume design contains equally revealing details. Costume designer Ronald Payne assigned each character a distinctive color scheme that degrades specifically as their mental state deteriorates. MacReady's earth tones become increasingly soiled. Blair's neat whites become dingy and stained. Window's bright colors fade to muddy hues. This visual progression happens so gradually that most viewers never consciously register it. Perhaps most fascinating is what the cast revealed about the chess game that opens the film, a scene many viewers dismiss as mere character establishment. The game MacReady plays against the computer contains actual chess moves from a famous 1978 match between Grandmasters Anatoly Karpov and Viktor Korchnoi. MacReady's frustration and destruction of the computer foreshadow his confrontation with another unbeatable, inhuman opponent. This chess metaphor extends throughout the film's blocking, with characters often positioned like pieces on a board, being systematically eliminated. The commercial failure of The Thing had consequences far beyond disappointing box office numbers. It fundamentally altered the careers and lives of its key creators in ways that remained hidden from the public for decades. John Carpenter, who had been riding high after the success of Halloween and Escape from New York, saw his industry capital plummet overnight. What few people realize is that, before The Thing's release, Carpenter had been in discussions to direct Firestarter for Universal, an adaptation of Stephen King's novel that seemed perfectly aligned with his sensibilities. After The Thing underperformed, the studio abruptly removed him from the project. "It was devastating," Carpenter admitted years later. "I went from being the hot new director to being practically unhireable." This professional rejection pushed Carpenter toward more commercial projects in subsequent years. Films he might not have made had The Thing succeeded. The auteur who had created an uncompromising masterpiece found himself directing Christine and Starman, more accessible films that restored his commercial viability, but marked a retreat from the boundary-pushing horror of The Thing. For Rob Bottin, the physical and mental collapse he experienced during production had lasting consequences. Though he would go on to create groundbreaking effects for films like RoboCop and Total Recall, colleagues noticed a change in his approach. After The Thing, Rob became more cautious, fellow effects artist Greg Nicotero observed. The experience had shown him the physical limits of what was possible, and what it could cost personally. Bottin worked consistently through the 1990s, earning Oscar nominations for Total Recall, 1990, and Seven, 1995, but gradually withdrew from the industry in the 2000s. His last major credit was Fight Club in 1999. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he has rarely appeared at conventions or in documentaries about his work. Perhaps most revealing is what happened to Kurt Russell's career trajectory. Though already established as an action star, Russell had hoped The Thing would demonstrate his range as a dramatic actor. The film's failure delayed this evolution by years. "I knew we'd made something special," Russell explained, "but when everyone tells you you're wrong, you start to question your own judgment." He wouldn't receive the critical recognition he sought until Silkwood the following year. While most film legacies are established upon release, The Thing underwent one of the most dramatic reappraisals in cinema history, a transformation from failure to masterpiece that unfolded over decades through channels its creators never anticipated. The first hint of redemption came through an unexpected medium: home video. Released on VHS in 1983, The Thing found a second life in video stores, where curious renters could experience it privately, without the influence of critical consensus or the comparisons to E.T. that had dominated its theatrical run. This intimate viewing context, often late at night in darkened living rooms, proved ideal for Carpenter's claustrophobic vision. The film found its audience one person at a time, producer Stuart Cohen observed. People would discover it, then make their friends watch it. This word-of-mouth resurrection created a growing community of admirers who appreciated precisely what critics had rejected: the ambiguity, the hopelessness, the graphic transformations. What most fans don't realize is how significantly the horror genre itself changed in the years following The Thing's release. Films like A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984, and Reanimator, 1985, pushed boundaries in body horror and practical effects, creating a context where Carpenter's work suddenly seemed less excessive and more pioneering. By the late 1980s, what had been dismissed as gratuitous was being recognized as groundbreaking. Perhaps the most meaningful validation came through an unexpected channel: academic analysis. Beginning in the early 1990s, film scholars began examining The Thing through various theoretical lenses, as an AIDS allegory, as a commentary on Cold War paranoia, as a study in masculine crisis. These interpretations elevated the film from mere horror to social document, revealing depths that even some of its creators hadn't consciously intended. Today, more than 4 decades after its release, The Thing has transformed from commercial disappointment to enduring cultural touchstone. A film whose influence extends far beyond horror into gaming, television, fashion, and even scientific discourse. But what explains this remarkable cultural penetration? The answer lies in how perfectly the film's central metaphor, an entity that absorbs and replicates, mirrors its own cultural journey. The Thing itself has become a kind of conceptual organism, infecting and transforming everything it touches. Modern series like Stranger Things and The Last of Us contain unmistakable visual and thematic DNA from Carpenter's vision. Video games from Dead Space to Among Us borrow its paranoia mechanics. Contemporary designers reference its Arctic aesthetics and practical effects in everything from runway fashion to theme park attractions. What many don't realize is how scientifically prescient the film was. Antarctic researchers have adopted The Thing as unofficial required viewing before winter deployments. The film's premise, an organism capable of perfect cellular mimicry, has entered scientific discussions about evolutionary biology and theoretical extraterrestrial life. In 2018, NASA scientists even referenced the film when discussing detection protocols for potential Mars missions, acknowledging that Carpenter's vision raised legitimate astrobiological questions. The cast themselves have witnessed this cultural transformation with a mixture of pride and astonishment. None of us could have predicted it would become what it has, Keith David reflected recently. People have tattoos of this movie. They name their children after these characters. It's surreal. For those who created it, many now in their 70s and 80s, this cultural vindication brings a certain peace. We paid a price for making it, Carpenter acknowledged recently. But knowing it's found its place in cinema history makes that price worthwhile. The next time you watch The Thing, look beyond the spectacular transformations and tension-filled scenes to see the hidden secrets most fans still miss. The breath continuity, the chess metaphors, the color evolution, the subliminal sound design. Because just like MacReady testing blood samples, the film rewards those willing to examine it closely, revealing secrets that change how you see everything that came before. If you found this exploration illuminating, hit the like button and share your own Thing theories in the comments below. After all, the best way to appreciate Carpenter's masterpiece is together, even if we can't be entirely sure who's really human.